Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight here at BCA. I'm Heather Farrell. I'm the curator and director of exhibitions. And I really appreciate you coming out on a very rainy evening in April. But we have a fantastic program for all of you tonight here in our in-person and virtual audience. With us is Margaret Jacobs. She has her solo exhibition, Kinship, now on view at the BCA Center. And we're very pleased to welcome you here tonight, Margaret, for tonight's talk. It is, as I said, a hybrid event between our in-person and Zoom audiences. And because of this, I like to make a few comments on tonight's format. For those joining us via Zoom, please use your Zoom Q&A feature to pose your questions for Margaret. Sarah Jane, our program assistant, will share the question with our on-site audience. And there's also a chat feature if you want to offer comments. And a reminder that the talk in Zoom tonight is being recorded and will be posted eventually to our BCA YouTube channel. So after my introductions, I'd like to turn the time over to Margaret, who will discuss the evolution of her work, as well as the important ideas and themes within the exhibition Kinship. And following Margaret's presentation, we will open up questions for our in-person and virtual audience. And because we are recording the program, if you have questions here in our in-person audience, we ask that you raise your hand so that Sarah Jane can bring the microphone to you. So for an introduction, in Kinship, Margaret Jacobs presents still sculptures and finely crafted jewelry that explore the tensions and harmonies between the fabricated and natural worlds. As an enrolled member of the Akwesasne Mohawk tribe in upstate New York, she investigates cultural histories and identity through her art. Working primarily in steel and brass, using techniques including fabrication, forging, and powder coating, her sculptures depict tools and botanicals such as garlic, mint, and strawberry, and demonstrate how materials can express their own distinct narratives. We see this in two bodies of work in Kinship, and that's the Old Growth and Partner Pieces series. And I'd like to share a brief bio of Margaret tonight. Margaret Jacobs received a BA from Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire, where she won the prestigious POD Perspectives on Design Award. She has participated in several artist residencies, including the UCROSS Artist Residency in Clearmont, Wyoming, the IAIA Artist-in-Residence at AIR program, the Institute of American Indian Arts, Santa Fe, New Mexico, as well as the Vermont Studio Center in Johnson, where she is awarded the Native American Fellowship via the Harpo Foundation. Margaret's work has been exhibited widely throughout the United States, including the Eugene Mercy Jr. Gallery in Windsor, Connecticut, the Abbey Museum in Maine, in Bar Harbor, Maine, I should say, Franconia Sculpture Park in Schaefer, Minnesota, the Boise Art Museum in Idaho, and the Ava Gallery and Art Center in Lebanon, New Hampshire. Her sculpture can be found in permanent collections at institutions across the Northeast, including Connecticut, New York, New Hampshire, and Vermont. She currently lives and works in Salem, New York. And before I turn the time over to you, Margaret, I would really like to say that it has been such a pleasure working with you these last few months and really working toward this exhibition, Kinship. BCA, we feel very privileged to be able to support the exhibition of the work of such important artists as Margaret, as well as to help support in part the creation of several new works like we did with the partner pieces for the show. And like all the works on view in Kinship, many of these are available for purchase if you are so interested. So thank you for joining us tonight, Margaret, and I'd love to turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Heather. Yeah, so there's going to be a question and answer at the end of it, but I think, if a slide comes up and you have a really like burning desire to ask a question at that time, I'm also happy just to address that during the slide. Yeah. So my name is Margaret Jacobs. I'm Mohawk. My family is from Akwesasne. It is in northern New York. The northern side of the reserve is on the Canadian side, and then the southern side is on the US. So there's just a really interesting history um, with, geographically of that place that I'm definitely thinking about in my work. I'm a metalsmith who creates fabricated steel sculpture and powder coated one-of-a-kind jewelry. Overall, my artistic practice concentrates on creating objects that highlight botanicals and relationship objects, items that hold cultural, personal, and familial importance. I'm interested in using visual vocabulary that can create layers in my work, so the viewer has the potential to relate to the piece in different ways. So I'd like to start by sharing 3 earlier pieces of sculpture. So this piece is titled Shedding Armor, and it was acquired by the New York State Museum. It's currently on view in an exhibition titled Each One Inspired Haudenosaunee Art Across the Homelands. And the exhibition features a selection from the New York State Museum's Contemporary Native Art Collection. This work was a pivotal piece in my metalsmithing journey. I attended a week-long workshop at Anderson Ranch in Snowmass, Colorado. And just having that concentrated amount of time to work on a piece, work with the material, really helped me understand the material in a way that I hadn't previously. And I really walked away from that having an understanding of where I wanted to go in my work, understanding of how to use the material in a way that I hadn't really been able to fully grasp before. And just I could kind of see my path, my own artistic path more clearly. This piece was an earlier commission. It helped me develop my visual language and understand steel as a material through the layering of multiple pieces. So all of the individual flower petals are forged and then I weld them together. And for me, it was really important to create a piece that looks like it was cast. It could, it could be it could be cast, it could be all one piece, when in reality, it was fully fabricated. So this next piece references how adornment can change the context or narrative of an object. And this is another one that really helped me develop my techniques and material understanding. Um, with the piece, I had to develop a way to make the steel look like leather, wanted to look organic, like fabric, like, like that heavy leather felt that you would see in the Western style hats or the Southeastern style hats. So I really needed to work the material in a couple different ways. And similar to the other pieces, I feel like when I finished it, I really had a better understanding of how to use steel um, to my advantage as an artist. So this is an image from a solo exhibition at Franconia Sculpture Park. I was there in 2021 as a visiting artist, and I was there for 10 days and had an exhibition at the end of it. I kind of gave myself a personal challenge for this. I wanted to create all of the work for the exhibition on site during my residency. I did end up shipping these pieces here out, but the rest of the pieces, so this is probably like 6 or 7 feet high. It's about human scale. Then these guys and all these over here were all created during the residency time. Um, I it I felt like it was good for myself to give that personal challenge. It's not a way that I would ever want to work again. I'd rather just keep it separate, and not kind of have that pressure of a show at the end or the culmination of residency. But I'm glad that I did that because it just helped me understand my processes as an artist. And it kind of forced me to really jump into things. I didn't really have time to kind of go slowly. I really had to decide, like, well, what do you want to make? You really have a short amount of time to do this. And so this is where I began to explore the cattail forms. So this larger piece, like I said, it's about human scale. And then this one over here is a little bit smaller. And for the cattails, that's something that always remember seeing them at my grandmother's house. She lives on the swamp, so the cattails would always be present. They're always present in my childhood. And going to Franconia, it's in kind of like, is it Midwest technically? I think it's Midwest. You go to these other geographic regions, you're like, oh, there's still cattails. They still have like these same plants, these same botanicals. You can, even though you're in this really different place, you still have those memories of and experiences that you have personally. So I really wanted to explore cattails for that reason. And then just technically it was a form that I could create quickly. And only having those 10 days really forced me to think like, okay, how can I make something quickly and authentically and still, be able to, present it and show it, have it be fully finished. So these forms were really what I concentrated on while I was there. And then I also made these smaller plantain pieces that I paired with these like cast objects. Franconia, I think, used to be mostly casting. Then they kind of switched directions, so it's all different kind of sculptural forms. But there's all these like cast relics there. So this piece, this like, I think it's like a farm track I found, and then this like round piece I found too, and then fabricated the plantains to attach to that. So these pieces, and this was kind of around the same time. So I was kind of like working on a larger scale and then a really tiny, smaller scale. These pieces were created for the Small Bini Gallery. And I created some miniature pieces specifically for the exhibition that combined plant forms and found metal objects. So the reason it's called the Small Bini Gallery is because it sits on a coffee table. Um, and this lady, I think I can't fully remember her name. I think Catherine out of Albany was doing these during COVID. So she created this little gallery. You could ship her the work. She'd have it for, I don't remember how long it was. But yeah, and it was really cool to play with scale in that way because, they're really tiny. But then in here, that could be, that piece could be 7 feet tall. So that was a lot of fun to do. And so here's close-ups of two pieces from that. So these are, this is blueberry and this is blackberry. And these are plants that I'm continuing to explore in my work. And I'm just finding that the more time I'm spending with them, the more I'm understanding about the plant and about how to make it. But these are probably maybe like 4 inches high. And then this was another piece that I created for that exhibition as well. So with the broadleaf plantains, if you don't know what they are, they're kind of like the weed that if you go out and look down, they're like the rounded leaves, and then they have like the tall stems with the little I don't know, like there's these little round things. So they're kind of everywhere. So they're called so it's broadleaf plantain, and I never actually knew the real name for it. I was just familiar with the plant growing up. And so its name is actually broadleaf plantain. And it's also called white man's footprints, because when the settlers came over, it appeared everywhere. And so I really like this plant because it's kind of a weed, it's kind of overlooked, you don't really think about it, but it's been adapted into cultural practice and used for medicinal purposes. And I really like that idea of this is something that you see all the time. It's so small, it's really common, it gets overlooked a lot, but it does have this narrative and this importance. And there's an adaptability to it as well. So that's why you see a lot of plantain in my work. This is an image from an installation at the Boise Art Museum. This work was created specifically for the show. based on tobacco flowers and leaves. I was really happy that I made it for the exhibition. I had the ability to make a really large piece of work, which was fantastic. But then I kind of came away from that show and just felt like it needed to be something else. And I really love steel because if it's not working, you can just cut it apart and reuse it. So that piece I cut apart and turned it into this right here. So this trio of works is based on the Three Sisters story, Corn, Beans, and Squash. So it's an interplanting system and has a lot of different stories in indigenous culture. But the Three Sisters shows us that, so this trio is called Three Other Sisters. And Three Other Sisters shows us that other plants have meaning, importance, and relationships to us as humans. And these three works are cattail, tobacco, and strawberry. And I try not to be precious with my work. So like I said, I cut that installation piece apart and created this piece for it and felt like it really found its final form with this work. So this is a close-up of cattail. And then a close-up of strawberry. And then this is installation at the Ava Gallery and Art Center in Lebanon. And these pieces were actually just recently acquired by RISD for their, I don't want to say chair department. I think it has a better name, but it's like essentially like they're like, I think it's like going to go on display with the other like chairs in the collection, which is cool. This piece is titled Subtle and Strong. This is another area where I use the fabricated tobacco leaves, and I combined it with these cast objects, or this cast circle. So I'm doing a lot of combination where I'm creating something, I'm combining it with something that I've found, and then trying to make it look like it's all one piece. It all seamlessly bonds together. It could have just been cast from all one object, but I'm really combining a lot of different elements. So I wanted to talk about my old growth series. There's, I think, 8 pieces on view here. This series began in 2019 with the Boise Art Museum exhibition. I'm still working on the series. I'm continually adding, adapting, cutting stuff apart, re-looking at it. The series intertwines recognizable ironworkers tools with culturally and familiarly influential plants and objects found in nature. So in this series, I'm giving a direct visual reference to the history of the Mohawk ironworkers that built skyscrapers in every US city, along with intermingling plants that remind me of my childhood and family. I see these pieces as single works, but I really like to create them so that they can exist in various groupings and be installed in different ways. And that's kind of in general how I see my work overall. But what I really like about this series is like I've created a lot of different pieces, a lot of different iterations, and every place that it goes to, the curators do something a little bit different with them. And just as an artist, it's really interesting to see how other people look at the work, install the work. So this was the first iteration at the Boise Art Museum. I either had 19 or 21 of these on view. And it was really interesting because I think Mackenzie was there at the time. She really wanted this like up and down movement with them. And it's something that like if I was installing the work, I never would have done that. But she wanted to do this and I was like, okay, great. And then we did it. I was like, oh, that's amazing. I really love the energy that that has in the space. These are 3 pieces that were at the Shelburne Museum. And kind of the same thing with this like this background, this really simple background that Carolyn did. It's something that I never would have, never would have thought of, and it makes the work really like pop out, stand out, and it gives it more presence. And then here, this on the left, this was at Loomis Chaffee in Connecticut, and then these 3 were just at Albany Center Gallery in Albany. So just wanted to go through close-ups of the series. So these were just shown as these are the most recent pieces, I think. And these were at Phillips in New York City. So this is blueberry, mint, juniper, and plantain. And even with plants that I'm using continually, I try and do a little bit of just something different each time with it. So jumping over to the jewelry, I also create powder coated jewelry. It just gives me an alternative visual language, and I find that I can create work that's accessible to the public in a way that's different than the sculpture. So these are some of the earlier pieces that are a little bit more simple, really just about the color, much more straightforward. And then this is my accessories collection that was featured at Indigenous Fashion Week Toronto. This was during COVID. So basically what happened is we shipped our collection to them and they created these video pieces because we couldn't have an in-person runway show. So they created pre-recorded fashion films featuring our collections. So I'll go through some of the close-ups of the collection. The festival happens every 2 years. It's happening again this year. I think it's at the end of May, in Toronto. So, and it's all Indigenous designers, the artists who are doing like the makeup, the sound. So it's a really fantastic event. So these are some close-ups of the collection. I really like the collar pin, so that's something that I was exploring. And then just combining so these I I hand cut and then solder together and powder coat, and then combining them with natural materials. So like here we have horn and leopard opal. This piece is turquoise. This piece is hand cut and powder coated brass pendant combined with vintage horn, powder coated chain, and silver. The work depicts the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash on the back of Turtle Island. So this is the front, and then so you can see like there's corn, beans, and squash, and then on the back, it has like the underside of the turtle. So these are tobacco flowers that imagery that I was using. I do use a bit of crossover imagery in my work. So tobacco, mint. I can't think of what else off the top of my head, but I am exploring them both in the sculpture and in the jewelry. So these pieces are when I started to explore more larger object-based jewelry. They're from my Indigenous Knowledge Pin series where I'm looking at a single botanical. So these are like smaller pins, and then these are the larger collar pins. So the close-up of these, this is milk thistle, dandelion, hazelnut, echinacea, strawberry. I'm using strawberry a lot in sculpture and in the jewelry. Blueberry, same with blueberry. Dandelion. I've started to use dandelion and chicory in my sculpture. But kind of at this point, I was just really using it in the jewelry. And then this is a sweetgrass collar pin. So after the pins, I tried to kind of expand them more into object. So these are echinacea rings, and then blueberry rings on the left and wild rose on the right. So this is, I call it my electric strawberry pin. So just kind of, exploring that object-based jewelry, but integrating precious metals. So you have the silver here. And so with the powder coating process, everything gets coated. So I kind of have developed this technique where I'll spray one color and then kind of like lightly spray another color. So it kind of creates this like tie-dye effect. So for this one, I had everything, and then you can see over here, I'm removing the powder coat so that you can see the silver strawberries underneath. Here we go. Okay. So then these are my partner pieces. They're my newer jewelry objects. I started with the garlic. They were kind of the first in the series, and thinking about his and hers, but really wanted a more inclusive vocabulary. So these really kind of kicked off the series, and so I had the garlic. Here I have the mint, and then there's a lot more in the gallery that we can see afterwards. And then I also wanted to show this bolo tie. So just oh, wait a minute. Is the video showing up on the right for you guys or no? So this was kind of departure for me. I powder coated all the individual pieces, and then assembled everything together to create the finished piece. So yeah, so here's the finished piece. So doing it this way gives me more flexibility with the color. So I could really like individually coat all of these little pieces and then put them all together. Whereas before, you could see like the color was pretty uniform, or I could do something that was really separate here. So this was created for the exhibition, the traveling exhibition, Everybody's Bolos. Everybody's Bolos explores the expressive potential of the bolo tie, its history in marginalized communities, and its current relevance as a gender neutral form of adornment. So bolo ties have just been something that I've been exploring, and was able to be included for the exhibition and created this piece for that. And then I have a couple older pieces I wanted to show, and then also like the new paths that I'm taking in my work. So this is an older piece, but I wanted to show it because it's a combination of the sculpture and the powder coat. This was a collaborative work with basket maker Gio Neptune, who is Passamaquoddy. Gio's a master basket maker, and we really, both of our communities, our basket weaving communities, heavily rely on the ash tree. The emerald ash borer is decimating the tree. So there's this conversation of, where does the material go? Do you hoard the material? Do you try and protect the tree? Do you start limit what you're making? Can you teach classes with the material if there's a scarcity of it? Can it be adapted? So we just really wanted to touch on that in the work. So I created, so on the left, this is all metal. When it's all together, it's really hard to tell what is ash and what is metal. So that's why I have like having the piece on the left here. So this I created out of metal, and then I powder coated it. I sent this to Geo, and they wove in the blue and the lime green ash and the sweetgrass rim. I know the uprights are called standers, I believe, but I don't know what the horizontals are called. But yeah, so this is the final piece. And yeah, so lastly, I wanted to show several recent works and new paths that I'm starting to explore. Most of last year for me was spent creating a commission for the Indianapolis Zoo. Every 2 years, they give out awards to recognize and reward individuals who have achieved significant successes in the conservation of animal species. The 3 awards are the Indianapolis Prize, the Jane Alexander Global Wildlife Ambassador Award, and the Emerging Conservationist Award. So for each award, an artist was selected to create basically an art piece to accompany the cash award. So I created the one to accompany the Emerging Conservationist Award. And this was last year was the first year that they gave it out. So then this piece here on the left, I have it titled Carrying Knowledge Mint. The work was inspired by Haudenosaunee utility baskets, but created and fabricated from steel mint leaves instead of the traditional black ash splint. Like I said, my nation is a basket weaving culture that heavily depends on the ash tree. And as the emerald ash borer becomes more invasive in the local environment and our trees are quickly being taken, the potential loss of this traditional form of making has been at the forefront of my mind. So this piece was really a start to a larger series based off of Haudenosaunee utility craft objects historically created from the ash tree, but reimagined with other ancestral important plants and botanicals. And I just received a fellowship through the Arts Council for Wyoming County in partnership with New York State Council on the Arts to continue working on this idea. So I've been doing a little bit of it, but this is really, I think, where my work is headed, where I'll be doing research about fine craft objects and kind of recreating them out of steel. Similar to the basket on the left. And this, so this piece was purchased by the Adirondack Experience. So this is their current display. So they have the utility baskets, and then my friend Neil Perkins beaded the straps on this one. So when hers, so I think they said in the conservationist world, fabric has to go in for 5 years to be protected. So it goes like out for, so it can be out on display for, I think it's 2 years, and then it has to go away for 5 years. So Neo's basket, when it goes out, they're going to cycle mine in, which is pretty cool, I think. This is a blueberry pairing where I had the, kind of started from the old growth series, but just trying to expand the idea. It's, I would say like, it's kind of like a baby step in a different direction. But slightly different. So this is newer that I'm exploring. And then these 3 pieces, I was asked by the Society of Inclusive Blacksmiths to show work in the Ferris Festival in England. So these are pretty small. They're made oops, The middle one's maybe like 7 inches. So I kind of think of this as an idea piece that I want to expand into a larger installation with different tools, and just thinking about like what plant tools we have, what, and then what metal tools. So this is a broader idea that I'll be exploring in my work. And then, so the sage bouquet is where I started looking at botanical forms without intermingling found objects. So this piece led into these 3. So I'm calling these bouquets for a new era. So in general, my work creates objects that showcase botanicals that hold cultural, personal, and familial importance. This series is the start of a new body of work that is centered around Indigenous plant knowledge, value systems. Flower bouquets are often given for special occasions, and I wanted to explore how the meaning changes when the more customary florals are swapped out with culturally and personally important botanicals and plants. Overall, I want to put a lens on what we value as important and have the viewer examine their own relationship to plants, the land, and their own personal value systems. And this is something that I'm also doing, I think, in the partner pieces, where in the bow ties, where, do you value a diamond ring? Do you value a garlic bolo? What's that imagery? What's it being set with? What's that value system? And so these 3 are featured at the Iroquois Museum's 2024 exhibition that is titled Outside the Box. And I think opens May 4th. Yeah, so that's what I have, and I'd love to answer any questions.
All right, I'm going to be an impromptu moderator here. Does anyone have any, yes, questions here?
Hi, yeah. Can you just relate the corn beans and squash story to us briefly? I don't know that story.
Yeah, so just it's an interplanting system. So it's an agricultural system. And it's called the Three Sisters. So you have the 3 plants grow together and kind of provide all the nutrients that are needed for the plants. So culturally, we call them the 3 sisters, and there's a lot of imagery that you'll see with like 3 women, and one's representative of like corn, one's beans, and one's squash. But the idea is that like you have like the corn stalk that then the beans kind of grow up that a little bit, and then you have like the squash down below.
Great. Other questions?
Yeah, why did you want to create pieces that looked like they were cast but were fabricated?
So I have a little bit of a theater background, and I think it goes back to that, where you're kind of always creating something that's not fake, but like you're kind of tricking the audience into something. So I found that my work kind of has a lot of that, of you're not quite sure what you're looking at, you're not quite sure how it's made. And it's kind of I think when you see it in person, it kind of pulls the viewer in a little bit of like, well, how's that made? How's that put together? It looks like it's supposed to be one thing, but it's really another thing. So I think it kind of started with like theater and has carried over. But I do think that it helps kind of engage and draw the viewer into the work more too.
I love your work, and I was so struck by exactly what you just said, because that was my experience. I went in there. How was this cast? How I wanted to understand the process that went into making it, and I couldn't figure it out, and saw the beauty in what was resulting in your work. It's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I don't want to say like I'm trying to like trick the viewer into looking more, because I don't think that's the right word. But I think like there's a curiosity factor of like, wait a minute, like what is this? Like, and it definitely like pulls you in. So thank you.
Oh, a couple of other questions, Elena, and then maybe one from our Zoom on.
I'd love to know a little bit more about how you found your way to working in steel and what was your process in sort of developing your technique.
Yeah, so I actually started out like painting and photography in school and then switched over to mixed media and just found that mixed media never really did what I wanted it to do. So then kind of like I had somebody, briefly show me welding and I started using it a little bit and it was definitely like, this is the material that I should be using. Like as soon as I started using it, I was like, this is what I need to be learning. This is what I need to be doing. It's like, this is what I've kind of been trying to figure out. So that was, so I was out of school at that point. So I definitely had to like figure it out. So I like to say independent education. I don't like to say self-taught, because I don't think you're ever really fully self-taught. It's like you're community taught, you're taking independent workshops. So, yeah, so I like to say like I had to kind of do an independent education path where I took classes from the tech school, I took classes from like Anderson Ranch, um, then just kind of like learning from friends, working on my own. But so that kind of took a while to get an understanding of the material and it was very slow and there's a lot technically with metal that you have to do. So you kind of have to learn all of these like technical properties of it. And then after like if you understand how to use it, how to safely use it, then you can kind of understand the material. So it was a really slow process, but I felt like after I came back from Anderson Ranch, I really like understood the material in a different way. And then just have been kind of going, full force and learning where I can, still continuing education, trying to do residencies, trying to do classes. Um, m- my work definitely kind of exists in between like fabrication and blacksmithing. So I'm combining a lot of different things. So I think like lately I've been trying to explore more of like the blacksmithing components of stuff. Was at a residency at Center for Metal Arts in Pennsylvania this January, where I was able to use a power hammer, and some of those larger tools, and then like learned how to use a charcoal forge. So I'm definitely still like trying to learn as much as I can about it, because I am kind of like combining fields, and I don't know, I just think as an artist, you always want to know more about what you're doing too. But yeah, did that answer the question? Okay. Yeah, it's kind of a windy path, but
All right, Samantha asked over Zoom, are you hoping to expand the medicinal pieces to encompass a broader array of the medicinal plants used by the Akwesasne to maybe use as educational pieces in the future?
hi Sam. Sam is an educator. So I like that question. Maybe. I think I how can I put this? Um I do I do a lot of educational work with the material. I'll teach, I'll do workshops, I'll do pop-ups and demos. But for me, when I'm kind of teaching others or educating others about metal and or sculpture, I have a really hard time working on my own work. So I think I haven't really thought of that before because I kind of try and like keep them separate in a way. So I've never really thought about kind of taking it and creating so it could be expanded into an educational format. Um, but I think I definitely want to kind of go deeper and focus more into the ideas. So I feel like right now I'm at the point where I have like certain plants and botanicals that I'm starting to get a really good understanding of. Um, and there's things that I've been looking at 4 years, but I feel like I really do have like the understanding of it now. So I do think I'm interested in kind of like going deeper into the specific plant that I'm thinking about. And I haven't thought about kind of creating that as an educational tool before. But I do, I'm, I'm interested in kind of going deeper, and I think that it could maybe naturally go that way. So I think that could be an interesting path, but it's not really one that I've thought about before.
Other questions?
Thank you so much. I also like find your work really compelling, especially when you were talking about like the kind of like transformation of materialities, like when you showed the hat and how you had to get the steel to kind of mimic like the leather. And I was wondering, you answered Elena's questions about how you got into your materiality, but I also wondered if you could talk a little bit about how that developed in relationship to like this really organic and natural imagery, which kind of, I don't know if you think of it as like in contrast or distinction from the materiality, or like, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things happening. I think it goes kind of back to the idea where I was talking about like, in theater, you're kind of not tricking the audience, but I like the idea that you have this material that is hard and it is big and it is heavy and it is usually seen in an industrial setting. Um, but that, you can take it and you can create these really organic forms. You can create fabric, you can create flowers, you can create plants, you can create leather, you can create something, you can really take that traditionally like hard material and make it look really soft. So that, and for me too, I'm just really interested in like materials and tools. So I think that's naturally kind of a part of, what I'm thinking about. But I do like the fact that, you can take this thing that's really supposed to be doing one thing, you can kind of like turn it into the other and create an entirely different conversation, and really change people's ideas and perspectives of what it is. So I think that's definitely part of it. I think I kind of, at the beginning of my path, I was a little bit like, I don't want to do anything with nature. And then I've kind of come like full circle. I think like that happens a lot where like, I will never do this thing. And then like 5 years later, you're doing the thing. So, so I think it's probably partly because I made that statement that I'm doing that. Um, but I also just like really like this. I think it's, I do like to make work that I think is accessible to people. I like to make work that's object based. I like things that you can kind of have like the smaller intimate moment with, or you can have like, a larger moment with it. So I think, yeah, I think I like the fact that you can, take this material that has certain expectations or this way of working or this form or this thing that you usually see and kind of just defy those expectations with it. I think I wandered there, but
Any more questions? I might end with a question because I always love artists such as you, Margaret, that I feel are very original and they take risks in kind of unusual ways. And for me, coming from Dartmouth and a traditional, maybe classical education in fine arts, for me, the risk is that bringing the fine art / craft tradition together. And I'm kind of curious if you could comment on that as far as like, where do you think that risk maybe happened, or where did you break from tradition and started to blend these paths, or was that part of your education or something that you kind of ventured out on your own?
Yeah, so I think there is definitely a conceptual slant to my education. And so, I grew up in Northern New York, rural lifestyle. My, come from farmers, come from workers. If something breaks, you fix it. You figure out how to fix it, you refinish it, you redo it. You're doing a lot of this work yourself. So I think from a young age, I grew up with a really high value of craft. And it's something that I didn't really even think about until I kind of started working with more craftspeople. And was like, oh, this is something that like I've always, when you're making something, you want a certain quality to it. You want to put it together really well. So I think that's something that I always started with as a kid that I never really thought about. Then when I got to school, there definitely a conceptual slant to things. And I had a teacher who I had a couple teachers, but one in particular that um she really impressed upon the fact that like, well, if you make the thing and it's falling apart, you can't get to the idea. And I was just like, well, yeah, 100%. So I think I just super leaned into that. Um, and I, it's just something that, yeah, well, you can have a great idea, but you have to be able to convey the idea. And if your idea is falling apart, it can't stand on its own, or it's not like put together well, then people are going to be looking at your construction, and you don't want them looking at your construction. You don't want them being like, that's a really shitty well. You want them to be looking at the piece. So yeah, so I think I just kind of like super leaned into it and went the other way. But then also just when I was at Ava, had mentors who were very much in the fine craft world. Um, and lived with craft in a way that I never really thought of before. And it's like, oh yeah, this ceramicist made this bowl. So every time you have a meal, you're having a meal with like this person. And that really kind of shaped the way that I thought about things as well. So I think those are kind of definitely influential. And then I think in particular with the material that I'm using, there's like fabrication based where you're kind of starting with like raw materials. You're starting with like a sheet or a tube or a round stock. And then you're cutting stuff apart and welding it. And then, or you could kind of go onto the blacksmithy side where, you're taking that and you're putting it in the forge, you're getting it hot and you're shaping it. And I think, and it's actually really interesting because I think this kind of conversation is happening in the metal world with a lot of people. When you have people who kind of have these like independent educational paths, there's no like right or wrong way to do stuff. So there's an artist, I think she's in North Carolina right now, Rachel David, and I think she uses an auto body hammer for some of her work. And I mean, like, if you're in the field, you're like, well, that's genius because people don't do that. But that's a tool to do that. And then you can do that on a large scale. So I think there's a really nice energy in the field now of people who are kind of, creating their own educational paths and like finding tools and ways to do things that maybe hadn't been taught in a traditional setting before, but because you didn't have like this traditional like path of learning, you can kind of create these new ways and these new energies. So that's something that I'm always just like really excited about in general. Like, can you find a new way to do this? Can you find a way that's like easier on your body, easier on your health? Can you find a shortcut to get from your idea to the object while still making it with your hand in a quality and authentic way? So that's something that I'm like I'm like really all about as well. So I think everything kind of like led into that. And now I'm kind of at the point where I'm like, well, it's been working. So when that little voice comes in your head and is like, oh, is this really gonna, you just kind of have to be like, no, I just have to do it. It's like, it's been working for this long. When it stops working, I'll stop, going down the path or whatever. But so far kind of exploring that line and working in this manner has been working for me. So I think I'm kind of at the point where I'm like, well, I just have to see it through until it doesn't anymore and I have to change.
That's wonderful. And with that, if there's not any more questions, well, I'd love to thank you, Margaret, for tonight's talk. We really are privileged to have you here tonight. I'd also like to say some thanks to Sarah Jane Kennelly, who is our public programs assistant, for being our Zoom mistress, as well as our amazing events and communications team. And then, of course, events and exhibitions such as Margaret Jacobs' Kinship would not be possible without our amazing community. And that includes our sponsors such as Mascoma Bank, our 2024 exhibition year sponsor, the Maslow Family Foundation, the Vermont Arts Council, and the National Endowment for the Arts. And all of you for coming out tonight on a rainy night to share in this talk and this exhibition. And I think at this point, we're going to end our Zoom feature of the show, but we welcome all of you after this. We're going to wander over to the actual exhibition on the other side of the building and invite you to just informally speak with Margaret for a little while and learn more about the exhibition. Thank you so much for coming out tonight.